Round 6 was another cracking round as the Adelaide Thunderbirds leapt to the top of the competition table. The Central Pulse created history, defeating the defending champions, the Magic, for the first time ever. And one of the game's greats, Sharelle McMahon, played her first full game for the Melbourne Vixens in over 2 years. As I say hello and welcome to Centre Pass, the official video podcast of the ANZ Championship. Dan Ryan here alongside former Australian skipper Kath Harby-Williams. And Kath, the big news this week, I've jumped ahead in the tipping competition, but on a more serious note...
Nobody cares!
But on a more serious note, Kath, the competition wide open.
Well, I think it's indicative because of the fact that you got 4 out of 4 and you have no idea about tipping, whereas mine's more educated, and that's because the competition's been turned upside down by various results. I'm not leading. But yeah, look, really exciting, Dan. It continues to be hard to tip. Last week was obviously extremely difficult for some. This week's difficult for some as well. So it's really exciting times for the ANZ Championship. There's no doubt about that.
Let's quickly recap all of the scores from round 6 of the competition. Of course, it started in Perth on Saturday. A packed Perth arena saw the West Coast Fever go down by 9 goals to the Melbourne Vixens, 58-49. The Adelaide Thunderbirds inflicted the Queensland Firebirds their first loss of the season, taking their second 1-goal win in as many weeks. The Central Pulse held their nerve to defeat the reigning premiers, the Magic, with a thrilling 53-52 win in Wellington. And the Southern Steel put the off-court drama behind them to produce an impressive performance against the Mystics, winners 67-52. The Swifts and the Tactix both had the bye in round 6. Checking out the competition ladder as it stands after 6 rounds. And we have a new ladder leader in the Adelaide Thunderbirds, the top 4 starting to take shape. But Catherine, 6 or 7 teams probably still in contention for the finals.
Yes, possibly. I've actually done some homework, Dan.
Excellent, we like that.
But because of the way the draw is structured, I've discounted the Fever. I actually don't think they can make the top 4 because they play the Australian teams twice. So I've looked at the 5 teams, Firebirds, Vixens, Thunderbirds, Magic, Pulse, and I've listed the games that they are playing against the teams below them, so those that I just haven't talked about then. The only thing I could come up with from that is the fact that the Thunderbirds are going to make the top 4, the rest is wide open, so there you go.
Thanks for your insights, Kath, answering all the questions we want to know. Great work by you. Turn our attention now to round 7 of the competition, back to 5 games this round. We're going to start with the Melbourne Vixens taking on the Central Pulse in Melbourne on Sunday. This will be a big game. The Vixens coming off a solid 9-goal win against the Fever. The Pulse coming off their first ever win against the Magic. The key stat here, the Pulse have never won in Australia, should I say, and probably haven't beaten top quality Australian teams enough.
No, they haven't, but isn't it exciting about the fact that we're finding it difficult to tip this game? You know, 2 years ago it would have been Vixens all over Red Rover, but it's a really big game. I think the key, if I was a Vixens coach, I'd actually put McMahon and Caldwell out there even if Howarth was available, because they have that moving, rotating circle, and I think Grant and Selby Rickett would struggle for that. I think there are 2 other players where the result will come from, and that's the wing attacks, Leota and Brown. They're the ones that penetrate and put the goal assists in. So I guess whoever's shut down, the other team will go on and win that game, but a really tight one and pretty exciting for the comp that we're talking about it in this manner.
Absolutely. I want to touch on Caitlin Thwaite. She's of course a premiership player for the Melbourne Vixens, moved to the Central Pulse a couple of seasons ago. She's an absolute dominant force in that Pulse outfit. Where is she standing at the moment in terms of Australian goalers for diamond selection? Because she's pretty lethal under that post.
She is, and having lived in New Zealand, I saw her play a lot. She's solid, she contributes all the time defensively, she has a go. I think one of her Achilles heels, if you like, is the fact that she only plays goal shooter, and in this day and age we're looking for some flexibility. So if you compare her to Cox, you think, well, she can provide the options with goal shoot and goal attack. But I guess Australian netball needs to look ahead. Are they looking to the Commonwealth Games and World Championships? Where does Cox fit in there? Where does Thwaites? But from her performance, she'd certainly be in the mix, and you'd have to go a long way in saying that she's one of the best goal shooters in the competition at the moment.
Absolutely. Currently the 4th most prolific in the league. Some interesting subplots there. The Melbourne Vixens against the Central Pulse. Our other game on Sunday will be the Queensland Firebirds hosting the West Coast Fever. The Firebirds suffering their first loss of the season last round. Of course, their first test against a top 4 team. The Fever, competitive against the Vixens, had opportunities, couldn't capitalise. But the big talking point in this one, Catherine, probably the loss of Chelsea Pittman for the Firebirds in that mid-court.
Yeah, and I guess you could say, well, the Fever have lost Brazil, so they almost cancel each other out. But Pittman was on fire against the Thunderbirds the other day, so that will be a massive loss. I think Geitz may shut down Bassett to a reasonable degree. Medhurst will be in the game a lot. But the interesting aspect, isn't it, when Fever had Furman, you know, they were a good matchup for Aitken, not as good now. So it is in Queensland, which makes it a lot more difficult for the Fever as well.
Interesting game, that one. Queensland Firebirds hosting the West Coast Fever. The next game we want to have a look at is the Northern Mystics at home to the Canterbury Tactix. We know the fortunes of both these teams so far this season. They take up the last two rankings on the ladder. They met, of course, in round 4. It was a 2-goal win for the Tactix in double extra time. It was a classic match. This one for the Mystics at home, it is all about redemption. They want to get it right this time.
Yeah, look, they would have been shattered losing that game against the Tactix last time. And they're a team that are capable of a really good performance, and I think they've got it in them, and that will happen this week. Tactix, Jo Harton is always the key. She was the reason the Tactix beat the Mystics last time. If they can shut her down, then the Mystics will be too good in this one.
A couple of big games on Monday night. We have the Adelaide Thunderbirds hosting the Waikato Bay of Plenty Magic. We know they're the reigning premiers. This one's a bit of a grudge match for these two teams. It was the Magic that knocked the Thunderbirds out of the finals race by a goal in the final series last year. Natalie Von-Berto will be back to lead the Thunderbirds at home. Different ball game, but still very hard to pick.
Yeah, two teams full of stars. And there's a lot of history between these two teams now, Dan, because they've played each other a number of times in the final series of the ANZ Championship. And as you said, I was at that game that the Thunderbirds lost to the Magic last year, and they were hurting, particularly when they saw that the Magic went on to win the competition. So I think they're two evenly matched sides, but just looking at the form going into this game, the Thunderbirds just have the edge over the Magic. The Magic are still trying to find their way. And look at last year, they lost 4 in a row and then they won the competition. So they'll come good eventually, but I'm not sure that it's this week.
The Magic are one of few teams that have a winning record over the Thunderbirds. Thunderbirds haven't beat them since the 2010 Grand Final. So that one is Monday night, the Thunderbirds hosting the Magic. Our final game of the round will be the Southern Steel up against the New South Wales Swift. Played in Invercargill. Unfamiliar territory for the Swifts to get wins down in the deep south, but a very good game for the Steel to get over the line here and consolidate what they did last week.
Yeah, look, Fowler again, you just got to keep talking about that woman. I joked last week about the fact that she'll shoot her average 50 or 60 goals. She shot 53 in their win the other day. Jodie Brown leads the competition in goal assists, so their game plan is pretty easy to understand, but Fowler is that good that it's still difficult to shut down. So what the Swifts will need to do is tire them out so that then those feeds into Fowler go astray. But the Swifts are struggling, as you said. They're playing in Invercargill and they're right into it down there. They play with 8 players, so yeah, it'll be a good one for the Steel to win.
The Steel backline too, we haven't spoken a lot about them. They really have stood up. Fitzpatrick and Rachel Rasmussen have really held their own against the likes of Tutaya and Latu. They were very competitive.
Yeah, and it's interesting because they're players that have been on the fringe, and at their best they're actually very exciting. Rachel Rasmussen is one of those players that has a go, and she's a real competitor. I played with her for a while and she hates to lose, which is good. But Tanya Fitzpatrick has always been touted as an up-and-coming player, a future Silver Fern. She was sitting behind Casey Williams and De Bruyne a couple of years ago at the Magic. She's sort of been let loose, if you like, and their combination is coming along well. And they're a classic example of how important it is to combine well. You might have 2 stars who don't combine well, and that's not nearly as effective. So yes, we must give them some credit.
That is Monday night netball. They're the Steel hosting the New South Wales Swifts in Invercargill. Well, time for the best part of the show. It is down to our tipping competition. I've jumped ahead by 1. I lead 20-19 against Harbs. I'm going to give you my tips first for round 7. This is how they look. I'm tipping the Melbourne Vixens to beat the Central Pulse at home. The Firebirds just over the top of the West Coast Fever based on the fact it's based in Brisbane. The Mystics will get it right against the Canterbury Tactix. The Thunderbirds, too good at home for the Magic. And the Steel, because of Fowler and Brown, will get over the Swifts quite comfortably. Harbs,
well, because you got 4 out of 4, I should follow your lead. But
well, you should if you were smart.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't be. I need a game to make up, so I should actually be contradicting you there. So I will, even though I don't believe in my tipping. So I'll pick the Pulse over the Vixens, and the rest the same.
Excellent, love your work. Well, that's all we have time for on this week's episode of Centre Pass. Catherine, thank you for all your insights and comments on this week's episode. Make sure you check out the ANZ Championship website for all of the broadcast details for round 7 of the competition. Until next week, enjoy the netball.